Hello, pod smashers of the internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-Bit Pod Smash,
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer.
We are your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I am Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right. And tonight we are doing a developer profile on Volition, also known as Deep Silver Volition. And they are a video game company that is well known for most specifically the Saints Row franchise. And we are doing this in honor of Saints Row's newest entry and reboot coming out this week. And sort of celebrating that, even though we're not huge, I don't think either of us are huge Saints Row fans. We are huge Volition fans because we think they make good work. And they employ a friend of ours who has been on the show before, A. Ray. So if you are interested in hearing more about someone who has literally worked with Volition before, you should check out that episode way back when. I think it was sub 100, like less than episode 100, but that's a great interview we have. So we'll try to link to that in the show notes if we can. Otherwise, yeah, Volition, Saints Row. We'll talk about their history and what they're known for and what they're good at and what they've brought to the industry, what they've contributed. We'll talk about all that and more, but where gaming goes to grab a beer. So what are you drinking tonight?
I am enjoying and embracing Virginia's false fall season because the weather kind of broke, but I am bracing myself for second summer where it will go again into the hundreds before we actually get real fall. So while I'm enjoying this false fall, I see Oktoberfests and pumpkin beers in the stores, and I'm like, yes, it is that time of year.
70 degrees. Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be, and it was chilly. I had to grab a jacket tonight because it's like misty rain and it's in the 60s. And I was like, oh man. I picked up Bell's Oktoberfest. Bell's out of Michigan, Comstock. Bell's doesn't make any junk. Their beers are awesome.
Love Bell's.
They make solid beer. And I'll read the bottle. This is their Oktoberfest, so it's a Marzen style. Bell's Oktoberfest is community in a glass. Our traditional Marzen lager has rich German malt flavors and crisp hop aromas, making it the perfect pairing for the annual festival tradition of drinking beer with friends. Perfect beer.
Perfect.
For tonight, because I am drinking a beer with a friend.
Is it already, are we already back around to Oktoberfest? Like, it feels like just yesterday we were talking about Oktoberfests and fall beers and, oh man.
It's that fast.
The endless march August, of time. Right?
Yeah, and it gets faster every year.
It does.
That's what happens. Yeah, this time last year, oddly enough, was the exact time we took a tour of this neighborhood, and we were anticipating possibly moving, and my wife getting the word that she got her job. Like, that was all a year ago now. So
yeah, wow. They say that's it's like a psychological phenomenon that it doesn't slow down, it doesn't plateau. It's not like you suddenly stop experiencing that phenomenon. Therefore, they've extrapolated that if we were to achieve immortality, we would all slightly go insane with the speed at which time would perceive to be passing in our reigns. Yeah.
Regular mathematical fractions. You increase the denominator is the total amount of days you have lived.
Yeah.
And a current day is always 1. So it's when you're first born, it's 1/1. On day 2, it's 1/2, which is half the amount of your first day. 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6. And now here we are in our 30s.
And if our perception of time is relative to that ratio, which it seems to be. It seems to be. It seems to be a universal human phenomenon.
Yep.
Then that would slowly drive us to madness as we watch the world pass us by without.
Gosh, could you imagine like billions of years of eternity and you just blink and the day's gone? Or like maybe you blink and a week is gone.
Yeah,
and you blink and like a month
3
is gone.
years have gone. Yeah, exactly. It would feel like that. Yes, potentially. Right. Like we don't know. We don't absolutely know that for certain because we have not lived that long. Perhaps there is a plateau that we can't reach because we die, before then. But until we get there, we can only extrapolate. Yeah,
technology advances.
Yeah, so like deep psychological, philosophical conversations aside, I am drinking a very lovely beer from Sierra Nevada called Sunny Little Thing. Thing. I've had Sierra Nevada's Wild Little Thing, I think before. So it's like the same style can, except it's orange instead of pink. But it's very, very nice citrus wheat ale. There, 5% alcohol. I don't know if it doesn't have anything to read on it. So it's a very, very nice, drinkable, summery beer. I actually have a Wild Little Thing too, which I'll probably drink next week. But yeah, very. It's citrusy and it's got that nice balance, almost like a Blue Moon, but just a little bit sweeter. Is kind of how I describe it. So it's still got that wheat beer flavor.
Yeah,
which is very inoffensive to my sensibilities.
Yeah, you love your wheat
with
beers.
also having that little citrus flash.
Yeah,
so, cool. All right. Well, then we can move on to talking about anything you would like to discuss, anything going on in the industry or in your life or in pop culture or in the world, just sort of a transitional conversation.
A delay. I think I sent you another video game. Another one bites
was,
the dust. Hogwarts Legacy of.
I thought it was already coming out next year. Am I crazy?
That was It was moved to February 2023. That happened.
I thought that it had been already delayed to 2023, though. Like I thought that was already a full.
Maybe
I'm crazy.
I just need to look up our conversation because, like you before our show, you had something you wanted to chat about video game related stuff.
I don't remember what it is, and so I'm blanking. No, I don't feel like. I didn't respond to it. You mentioned it, and I didn't respond to it because I was thinking.
Was it Rockstar being completely rebuilt internally by?
No, that's awesome. I do remember what it was.
Yeah,
it was Persona 5 Royal.
Mm-hmm.
They've showed off the 60 frames per second next gen gameplay. It looks lovely. It looks awesome. Yeah. The downside is that once again, Sony's poor decision making is screwing us users because Atlas has said that they're not going to give a free upgrade path to PlayStation users, unlike Xbox users who are going to get to play it via smart delivery with no additional cost. PlayStation players will have to buy a full brand new copy of Persona 5 Royal Next Gen Edition in order to benefit from its upgrades and presumably like things like second trophy lists and stuff like that. So not even a discounted like $10 upgrade path, and it's all Sony's fault. Because I don't blame Atlas, whatever. Like Atlas.
Well, you're not wrong. That has been the case for all of Sony's upgrades, but Persona 5 is not on any Xbox platform yet ever, and its first time ever is going to be in October on the Series X. So there's not really a smart delivery. There's no upgrade.
Right, they don't really need to. Okay, yeah, that's fair. I kind of had not considered that until just now. But
were you talking about Mortal Shell? I think you were going on about Mortal Shell.
I was also because it's also a fresh wound for me because of Mortal Shell. Nevertheless, it's still the point still remains. Had it been on Xbox, it would have been available, right? Like, there's no question. Right. There's no developers don't even have a say in it at all.
Yeah, Microsoft
maybe to their own detriment,
switch,
but it's just boom, boom, right? Like, so this is definitely not the last time we're going to deal with this generation, and that's what bothers me is that Sony. There's no reason why Sony. Well, no. The reason is because they chose not to program it, right? There's nothing technologically speaking that prevents them, obviously, because Microsoft did it, right? And they're not dummies. They willingly chose not to include that feature in the console, despite the fact that people have been begging for it since cross-gen titles have existed, right? And the technology has enabled for it.
Yeah, it's like whatever has to happen on the back end for PlayStation Store, the PSN, to get the PlayStation 5 native app, which is different from the PS4 native app. And if you remember the hurdles we overcame 2 years ago when the console first came out, where like you'd put a PS4 disc in, you'd get the PS5 upgrade, and then it would install both. Like it would automatically start installing PS4 version off the disc.
Still pretty much happens.
Yeah. It's awkward and weird. And like the PlayStation console doesn't really recognize that it's the same thing, and all you need to do is switch between which version you want to play. So it's a weird, obtuse solution, I guess, for lack of whatever it takes on the PSN side to get that PS5 upgrade, that native app to happen is the problem. So I feel like it is kind of on Sony.
I really hope that like, you know, I love what PlayStation's doing and its exclusives. I'm probably going to be slow to ever disadopt that platform, at least in the short term. But I really hope I genuinely hope they start losing like business to Microsoft for it so that they implement it, right? Like they're not dumb. They know they probably have it ready to like more or less ready to patch in. They've certainly done the development on it at the very least. They're probably ready to do it once they realize it's going to be impactful for their business.
Yep.
I'm just hoping that happens sooner rather than later because this is ridiculous. Like it's so dumb.
Let's actually like walk through this Mortal Shell situation for our audience who might not have a clue what we're talking about. So you hit me up and you're like, just snagged Mortal Shell PS5 version for $9. Sad news is there's no save feature, right? So no save feature, so you can't transfer your save from the PS4 version to PS5, so you got to start over. And it's also like you had to upgrade, because if you get Mortal Shell on PS Plus for free, you had to upgrade for $9, right? Is that how it worked?
Correct. I got it for no, I wasn't even upgrade. You had to buy a second there's no upgrade path. It's just the PS4 version. And then there's the PS5 version. If you want the PS5 version, you buy it straight up. I got it for $9 because it happened to be on sale for like 80% off. And so I was like, oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
But I didn't do my research. I guess it's my fault, but that feels awfully like blaming the victim. If I had done my research, I would have discovered that they're treated as entirely separate games, and not only is there no like upgrade path provided by the developer. I'm blanking on their name right now.
Cold Symmetry.
Cold Symmetry, that's what it was. I knew it was something S word. Yeah, Cold Symmetry not only did not provide an upgrade path, they didn't provide a save transfer feature so that you could just like pick up where you left off and keep working on your trophies, or even possibly pop separate trophies. No, it's a separate game, and honestly, I don't blame Deep Silver. They're a small, tiny indie company, and to ask for PlayStation to. Or to ask for PlayStation essentially to ask them or demand that they design and test and execute on a save transfer feature when they're a tiny team that's just trying to put out more work, like that seems like too much. Whereas with Xbox, which I looked up and confirmed this on Xbox, you put Mortal Shell, what version you put it in the Xbox Series X, it's going to automatically give you the Series X version of it, and therefore not a problem at all. So it was a little bit of salt in the wound. And to see that at least on some level, yes, it's not the exact same analog there, but to see that, again, Atlas is just like, no, we're not going to take the time to mess with this. And Atlas is a much bigger company than Cold Symmetry. Just goes to show how ridiculous it is that Sony has put this limitation when the developers want it, the consumers want it, and the only people that don't seem to want it are freaking Sony. It's like,
but you know what it means for Sony? What they get out of all of this is more money.
Of course they do.
They're not incentivized. They're not incentivized at all. They have no reason to do it.
Yeah, then why Microsoft do it, right? Because
they're not in the lead. They're not the leading platform. It's outsold their previous generation 2-1. That was in the news. PlayStation 4's final sale numbers came out.
I saw that. Mm-hmm.
And there was another insider's take on it that said that they outsold Microsoft's Xbox One 2-1.
Nice.
So it gives you, because Microsoft never releases their sales figures.
But
that's
why I mean.
So Microsoft's trying to do a lot of consumer friendly moves with Game Pass, everything, because they're on the ropes. Like they're not winning. Sony doesn't have a reason.
As we discussed last time, they're not on the ropes. They're making money hand over fist, or else they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Microsoft is not a company that just like keeps things going for charity. No, they're. I guess my point though is that like certainly, and I've made this point before, right? Like these are decisions that pay off, that have consequences in the long term,
right?
And goodwill. It's like you need to. It comes up regularly on this podcast, probably not often enough, but quality of life is a big deal for consumers these days because we have things so easy. Cell phones, right? Like to make the argument that like cell phones shouldn't do quality of life things because that would not make money is like a crazy obtuse. Like it is the quality of life that has been provided to us by the internet and cell phones and technology that enables or that gives us more of a desire for quality of life. And therefore, when you put needlessly obtuse systems in place, or rather you have a needlessly obtuse system that you will not improve with technology that is readily available, it's going to have long-term consequences if you're not forward thinking enough to realize that. And it's going to, people already, I mean, you and I, it took 2 seconds to see through it for what it was, it's greed. It's just, they're going to make more money off of it. So of course it's like, F you, Sony, F you. I'm not afraid to I may be a fanboy, but I'm going to criticize the crap out of you.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole thing going on also on the side. This will be the last thing that I'll bring up. There was a game published on the back end of PSN, which means you can see it, but it's not out yet, called Push X for Platinum. Literally, that's what it's called. Or Push X for Trophies. One of the two. But it's the same idea. It actually got traction because of some tweets and some posts on Reddit to like force Sony's hand. And they've actually come out and said that they have tweaked the algorithms on the PSN to de-emphasize. There's a whole bunch of these like jump French fry games and like my name is Mayo, where you just push something to get trophies. And there's this whole movement now of like, Sony, why do you not enforce any sort of like curation on your trophies for like value of platinum? Why are you letting some developers get away with this and then others not? And like, there's no consistency. So Sony's in hot water for that too.
Good.
Like,
good. Let's keep the water, keep turning up the heat, everybody. And then we'll actually see changes.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Who knows?
It's a slow industry to change, but for as fast as the industry seems to move, it's a slow industry to change. In some good news, though, I saw some very, very last thing. I saw some screenshots of Unity's new engine, their Unreal 5 competitor, and oh man, it's gorgeous, just like Unreal 5 is. But oh man, I can't wait to see what developers are going to be able to do with these engines in the coming years. And I will very well even maybe say that from what I've seen so far from the work of the engines for first party studios, Unreal they may have to go back to the drawing board, because Unreal and Unity may so greatly and obviously surpass them for the first time in a long time that they may need to put some serious thought and effort into their upgrading their engines. We'll see.
Looking at you, Square Enix.
Yeah, seriously. All right, well,
wow.
Greedy platform manufacturers are not our favorite thing, but
80-bit pod smash is our favorite thing.
80-bit pod smash is our favorite thing. I like how I can watch you jiggle now that we're using cameras again.
Yes. We should have been doing this from the beginning. But Zencaster updated the platform to allow us to do this, so here we go.
We did, and we still sat on it for longer than we should have. But
yeah, we did.
All right.
Favorite things.
Segment of our show where we share with you something that we are excited about, that we are digging this week, in hopes that you go out and find your next favorite thing.
Woof.
I will start.
You right over there?
I'm good. I've got two things, and I'll be quick. First one is it was a bittersweet pain to get them and to make sure that they were installed and paid for correctly, but we finally have upgraded our appliances in our home and are using appliances that are newer than like 15 or 20 years ago. We had some. Our fridge was like running hot, so it would do this thing where it occasionally just start like melting things in the freezer just because the thing was overheating.
Jeez.
And then we had so it was like the fridge itself and the freezer, its function, were like fighting like constantly and waging war, which was probably not great for our energy bill.
Right.
And then our dishwasher also was having some issues with like draining, so it would like drainage, so it would get like really yucky at the bottom, like gross at the bottom, which is again antithetical to the purpose of a dishwasher. And then also, so we'd have to like scrub it out regularly. And then also like we had a rack that was like messed up. So we were like, it's time. We've been saying we're going to do this for a while. Let's do it. So we bit the bullet. Did not come easily, but finally we have nice new appliances. They look good. They have, much better energy. We haven't like seen the payoff of the energy dividends yet, but I'm pretty sure that our electric bill will be marginally cheaper next month. And then also, it's just they have nice functions and stuff, and they're just nice. It's nice to have new appliances. Everything's clean. I'm like cooking on my stovetop now, and I'm like afterwards I'm like scrubbing it with like the magic eraser, because I'm like, I don't want these to get dirty. I want them to stay. I want to stay on top of them because they're clean now, so I'm gonna keep them clean. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to share as my favorite thing is Netflix's Sandman is awesome. It's so good. It totally lives up to all the hype.
I didn't know there was hype
the
about
ratings. Oh, there's so much hype, dude. People saw the two like comments that I've seen so far that I probably agree with, although I've never read the original, so I can't really say that I know this for sure. Like I can't back it up, but I've heard people who are fans of the comics say it is now a masterclass on adaptation, as in this is the work that people should point to when they say this is what it looks like to adapt a comic book or to adapt a book series or anything. So it's now new gold standard of adaptation. Additionally, I've heard that it has one of the episodes is the single greatest hour of television. No, sorry, single greatest hour of cinema into the year 2022, which again, limiting it to a year, but consider this year that like Stranger Things is also really like highly well reviewed this season and stuff. So like there's plenty of competition for that. And so excellent. And I would, if it's the episode I think they're talking about, I think I would agree with it. It's not an easy episode to watch, but it's incredible the way that it's shot and performed and written.
So this is DC Comics' Sandman, not the Sandman that was in Spider-Man.
Correct. No, yes. DC Comics Sandman, written by Neil Gaiman, which is why it's just like incredible.
Show was written by Neil Gaiman, or the comic?
The comic was written by Neil Gaiman, and I believe he was an executive producer on the show as well. So I think he had a
listed
large
as a creator of the show on IMDb. I'm just trying to figure out the source material here. Because I saw Sandman, just rolled my eyes and moved on. Because I immediately thought of the really bad Sandman and Spider-Man.
No,
and I was like, that's dumb.
No. This is like Morpheus, King of Dreams, like from the mythology of and then he's just, his nickname is the Sandman because he uses sand for his like powers.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very trippy. Very good. Great cast.
You know that Neil Gaiman also did a season of Doctor Who? He was a writer for it.
I know which episode he wrote. He only wrote one episode, but I know which episode he wrote.
Episodes down to okay, gotcha.
Yep. He did Good Omens. He did a really great B movie called Stardust, which I highly recommend everybody go find and watch because it's excellent for being just like a B movie. But
Beowulf, also from the same year, 2007. Interesting. All right,
he was involved in the 2007 Beowulf.
Yeah,
like the CG one.
Yep.
What? Okay, well that is seen that. It's not very good. So that is that will be the flop.
I clicked on his name on IMDb and that's what showed up. So
cool.
Don't know anything. I don't know anything about anything.
It's funny. Who am I? Wow, 71%. Not bad on Rotten Tomatoes. It didn't get as bad as I would have expected on Rotten Tomatoes, but say la vie. All right, I'm done. What's your favorite thing?
My favorite thing is I finished Persona 4. I started Persona 4 and I almost exclusively played it on airplanes and on travel. And I had so much time traveling and on airplanes that I had a ridiculous amount of time to sink into it. It was, I know I put like a 6 to 8 hour stretch in nonstop on a flight to Hawaii, and it was amazing. Persona 4 lives up to the hype. I play it on my PlayStation Vita. It's Persona 4 Golden. It originally came out on PS2, and then the Golden version is like extra characters and a whole new dungeon and stuff added to it.
So basically, it's like Royal. Just like Royal for Persona 5.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, exactly. And ridiculously relevant. The entire plot is awesome. There's a big fog, and you know how Persona has layered mechanics, like the main character's going through some stuff, and you have the other world folks influencing and have a target and a goal, and that target and a goal is also applied to the society with which you're interacting with in the small town of Inaba. And so there's a antagonist who has a goal to move society in a certain direction, and then you have the protagonists who are like bucking that trend in a world that we have lived in over the last 6 years or so that is constant fighting between misinformation and truth. This entire game's theme is based on that premise.
Nice.
And it's
a murder mystery too, right? Like it's sort of all wrapped up in like a murder mystery. Nice.
Yeah. So it's so
I really want to play it. Is it better than Persona 5?
It is in plot and writing equal. Like exactly the same. It's so good. Wow. And it's addicting and appealing in the same ways that Persona 5 are, with a different plot, different emphasis on different stuff.
Nice.
But I like this gameplay. I almost like it more because it's simpler. There are fewer things to do every day. The towns and the places you can go and visit there's fewer of them as well.
I was understanding though that the combat was more complicated and more difficult. Is that correct? In 4,
I wouldn't know because I put it on like the story mode difficulty where you level up really fast. I was like level 98 by the time you just button mash, and when you die, you just get revived with full health. So like, there's no like I don't know. Just
boring to me.
It was awesome. So I could just gloss over combat and like every single boss.
For someone who says they prefer the combat in D&D over the role playing, you certainly seem to not apply that.
Yeah, I was here for the story. Like I really was. I did not want to fight and grind. I hate grinding. I
wish you would be there for the story of my game, Danny.
Life happens. Life gets in the way.
That's all good.
So I think Persona 5 edges it out. Like I think Persona 5 is better. And Persona 5 made its way into my top 3.
It was your first. I wonder if you had played Persona 4 first, if you had, right? Because it's sort of like, it kind of, the game. Sometimes the game which introduces you to a franchise is the one that you're always going to love.
It's true.
The most.
Yeah. Like Final Fantasy 7 for me.
It's it's Final Fantasy 7 for me as well. Ocarina of Time for me, right? Like that.
Link to the Past.
Why I like it more than Link to the Past. Exactly. Yeah. See, there's some. I'm not gonna say everyone, right? God of War 2018 is way better to me than God of War 2004 or whatever it was. But yeah. Lord. All right, we're not gonna have time for DLC if we keep this up. So Persona 4.
Persona 4. It's awesome. Yeah,
I got a fairly quick DLC, but it's gonna start with actually a sort of a question here. So in honor of Volition, which so real quick, our next segment before our final segment before our main topic is DLC.
DLC.
Downloadable content. It's a segment of our show where we have a conversation we'd normally have about video games This time I want to talk about what would you define. First, we'll start with the question: what would you define as the difference between a sandbox and an open world game, or is there a difference?
Oh, there is definitely a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So, an open world game, by definition, is the player can advance the story in any order. There's no linearity applied to the character at all. So, Breath of the Wild is the cream of the crop right now, where you can fight all the dungeons, see all the bosses, including skipping everything right to the end.
I would also
of
say
course,
you
have free exploration.
It has some level of free exploration, some level of a level design that includes, free or at least limited. Or at least less limited exploration than a linear game, which would have like hallways, basically a series of hallways.
And I feel like the epitome of sandbox, it might be a little bit surprising to some, but the epitome of a sandbox game is Gary's Mod from Half-Life.
Yeah.
Where you had all of the assets from all of Portal and Half-Life and Left 4 Dead at your disposal to create any sort of crazy thing and play with the physics and do whatever you... Minecraft is another one of those sandboxy kind of games.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like there's no story plot moving forward. In the case of Grand Theft Auto, which is also labeled as a sandbox game, there is a story, but that story is linear and you progress through it progressively, like you follow the plot.
Sure.
But also you can go explore any of the cities and wreak havoc. And
right. I was going to say it's like in many ways, I would say that in many ways, sandbox is sort of a subgenre of open world, right? Because I would sort of say it's one of those things where it's like all sandboxes are open world, but not all open world games are sandboxes. And then there's some weird hybrids in the middle, and like Grand Theft Auto and Saints Row, which is why I bring it up, are kind of in between. Are kind of like hybrids, sort of, where it's like they have a very linear story, but also this big sandbox, and it's almost like two different modes of gameplay, as opposed to Breath of the Wild or Skyrim, which they merge the open exploration with the story, and it sort of becomes its own thing that feels less sandboxy. But so that comes to my DLC. Then I find that sandbox games tend to be more like real world cities kind of things, right? So like Grand Theft Auto, like Saints Row, like Just Cause, whereas I think Just Cause, I might be wrong about Just Cause.
Totally it. Yeah,
is it sandbox? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Whereas opposed to like, I don't think there's a lot of, or they're like really weird and out there, like Minecraft and Gary's Mod. Whereas I don't see a lot of like sandbox games that take place in fantasy. So therein lies my DLC. How would you take any fantasy setting? It could be Elder Scrolls, it could be Zelda. How would you make it more sandboxy and less what we would call an open world gaming experience?
I just take the ideas of like Grand Theft Auto and apply it to a world where you can be like a wizard and you fly around and you can do whatever you want with all these different magic spells or gear. If you don't want to fly and be a wizard, you could have like deck yourself out as a gnome, knight, whatever Lord of the Rings fantasy you want to do, and go make your own Helm's Deep battle happen, and just like wreak havoc and go crazy. And Skyrim kind of touched on that by killing NPCs. Like you could get yourself arrested, fight the guards, and like create a whole like thing. And so it kind of had its toe in that water. But yeah, that's kind of what I would think. I feel
like Breath of the Wild could have really benefited from almost like a sandbox mode, call it like Hyrule mode or whatever, where you could just go in and like have all the areas unlocked. The dungeons are kind of sealed off, so you can't like access them, but you don't need to because you can like get the powers other ways.
Yeah.
Almost even like maybe even randomized ways. And really the emphasis, I feel like it wouldn't have taken much effort to just like make a few tweaks to the programming and then just launch that as like a separate game mode, or patch it in as a separate game mode. And it would have,
they might as well. I mean,
hit, right?
The entire gaming community has taken off, and just doing the Twitch streams and the videos of all the crazy physics-based stuff that they're launching themselves across the whole thing, like using lightning and like the magnet like the most, stuff.
For a game that is by no means marketed as a sandbox or even like talked about as a sandbox, it is one of the most like popular games to do sandboxy things in, and therefore I'm like, to me it's just like a no-brainer. Why not just make an entire game mode dedicated to it?
Yeah, I wonder if Breath of the Wild 2 will have that.
It's not their vision, I get that, and I respect that, but at the same time I'm like, kind of a missed opportunity, because they really could have, I think that would have been so popular, right? Yeah. So anyways, and it's one of the examples of such an easy tweak, right? Like I don't think Skyrim would have been as easy to tweak to be a sandbox, more of a sandbox experience as it would be for Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild really just feels, because they put so much effort into fleshing out the world and making it feel like a place that goes on, whether or not your involvement is there. That like it would have just taken a couple of tweaks to and tweaks more related to character progression than anything else to let you just go ham. So
yeah, funny you mentioned Breath of the Wild. One, we're contractually obligated on every single episode, right? But two, it's been 5.5-ish years, and like I'm jonesing to go back. I'm getting nostalgic for it now. And like I didn't expect that. Like, oh, I'm already nostalgic for a game that's kind of current gen.
I regularly experience that phenomenon because today I was jonesing for Elden Ring for no reason. I was like,
oh yeah, it's really recent. Yeah. Earlier this year. It's months ago.
I am experiencing nostalgia for Elden Ring. Wow. Yeah. It's pretty funny. So maybe because I'm just ticked off at Mortal Shell still. One boss away from the platinum, and I had to give it up because I was so frustrated. I guess I couldn't do it. It was beyond my. I think it was one of the first times, not the only time. I did the same thing with Dark Souls 2. I said it is beyond my capacity as a player to do.
Yeah,
and to continue to keep doing this will frustrate me so much that it will rob the experience of what was otherwise a fairly fun game. And so for the sake of my own memory here, I'm going to just step away and do something else. So I'm casually playing Nier as a result of putting down Mortal Shell. And we'll see. Yeah. So all good. All right.
Volition.
Well, that is DLC. So we'll move on to our main topic, which is Volition developer profile. So these always follow sort of a formula here. We'll start by talking about the basics, who they are, what they're known for, what's their story, and then we'll talk about what our favorite Volition games are, how they brought in innovation, and we'll talk more about like things we want to see from them and stuff like that. So start with just the basics then. Who's Volition? What are they known for? And what's their story?
They are now known as Deep Silver Volition, LLC, an American video game developer based in Champaign, Illinois. Is that how you pronounce that, I think? They were founded in June of 1993 as Parallax Software by Mike Koulas and Matt Toshlog. They developed Descent and Descent 2, which is wildly popular amongst any sort of retro gaming PC enthusiasts. If you've heard of Descent or Descent 2, like, oh yeah, that's a really big deal. The company split in two, wherein Toshlog founded Outrage Entertainment, while Koulas stayed with Parallax, which was named Volition in 1996. 4 years later-ish, in August of 2000, THQ acquired Volition, and when THQ filed for bankruptcy, infamously, had its assets sold off, Volition changed hands to Deep Silver in January of 2013. Volition is best known for its Red Faction and Saints Row series of games, which I have actually played Red Faction, so that's cool. So that's kind of the summary and history of what Volition is. If you've heard their name in the news, it's because of those things. I know it was boiled up everywhere during the whole THQ falling bankrupt.
Jacob, yep.
Yeah.
But Koulas is still, he's still like, he's been with the company since it was Parallax and back in 1993. And he's now still the general manager of Volition proper. And then also another key person is Jim Boone, which I was trying to figure out like when he came onto the scene. But he's now, I wonder if he's a part of Deep Silver or not. But nevertheless, like it's led by those two guys, and obviously one of the founders is now now got his own company, Outrage or whatever. Which I don't know. Do you know anything about Outrage? If they
Outrage, I just looked it up. They made Descent 3, and they became defunct in 2003. They made Descent 3 and Alter Ego, which is an Xbox original and PS2 game. And those were the only two games that they made before they went defunct.
This Sadly. Is funny. As Koulas' company was to receive a new name, he asked the team for ideas. When he found none that he liked in the proposals, he sat down in his living room and started pulling through books and stuff looking for a possible name. In a glossary, he found the word volition and discovered the definition as an intense and active will to accomplish something. And he's like, that's it. that's our name. Perfect. That's pretty funny. Well, I've done that before, whereas like, I'm trying to, in D&D recently or in some of my other creative efforts, I'd sit there and be like, man, I really want to come up with a name for something. And I want it to mean like this, but I don't want to use this word because it's either overused or whatever. So I'll sit there and just like, pull up the thesaurus and be like, what is another word for such and such? And, I've had some success with something like that. But
yeah.
Good stuff.
So following that split, Volition and Outrage signed with Interplay for 2 further projects each. The first project under the new name was Descent Free Space, which was just simply known as Free Space, so which is also kind of, that's familiar to me. I don't think I've played it, but I've heard it. A game that was set to improve the concepts of Star Wars X-Wing and Star Wars TIE Fighter, which are also like PC flight games. During the development of Free Space, Volition team doubled in size, adding 5 or 6 people to its studio. But I will fast forward to their being acquired by THQ, and they came out with this lovely PlayStation 2 title called Summoner, which I have on hand. Unlike other games by Parallax and Volition, was developed as a role-playing video game, the genre the development team had no experience with. Because if you think about their history, Descent and all of the Free Space were all like flight type of open, like 360-degree rotation in every direction at any time kind of games. Now we're talking about an RPG.
They're also known for Red Faction, which they also made in that same time frame of the early 2000s. This was the game that this is probably my first like orbit, right? I never owned Red Faction because I think it was PlayStation 2, but I played Red Faction, like or watched it being played, and it's described as a ground pounder. And that's so accurate because that was like the big thing, right? Everyone was like, oh man, you can blow up chunks of the wall and you can just dig holes into this place by blowing things up. I was like, that's cool. So it's kind of again, that was a very big kind of like gaming first, right? Where they had destructible environments. And so they kind of prototyped that with Red Faction. And then, 2006 through 2008 is when they would be where they started the Saints Row thing after apparently having done some work. Oh no, they had played Grand Theft Auto 3 and were like, wow, they wanted to make a game like that, and so they were inspired by Grand Theft Auto 3 to work on Saints Row.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So during the game's development, the studio overspent its budget of $8 to $9 million and brought up its headcount to over 100.
Woo.
After the team was finished, they were asked to write post-mortem documentations, which presented a lot of negative views on the game as well as criticism of the management. Wow, all the way back in 2006, they were ahead of that curve as well of mismanagement and overworking. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, so that's, and then of course they continued to work on Red Factions and Saints Rows until their acquisition by Deep Silver, which their next game would then look like it would be. Like other than Get Out of Hell, the Saints Row 4 expansion, looked like they would then release Agents of Mayhem, which was their most recent one until this reboot, which is coming out this week. So cool. All right,
can we move on from history? Yeah,
very interesting. But yeah, so the biggest things they're known for probably Descent, Red Faction, Saints Row, and to a lesser extent Summoner, because I was familiar with Summoner, but not super familiar with Summoner. So.
It was a PlayStation 2 launch title, which is kind of how it got its fame. Like, right, that whole launch window console games that are kind of not that great or would normally come out and flop actually get some recognition because it's like people will buy it just because it's something to fill a genre gap or something on a new system they just bought. It's like, I know I've done it in my own. Like, I bought Red Steel on the Wii just because it was published by Ubisoft. It was not a great game, but it was like, oh, you can use the motion controls to like shoot the gun and swing a sword, and that's cool. Yeah. And I would have never bought that game had it not been a launch title, and I was looking for something cool to play on my new Wii. But almost every console, I buy something dumb with their launch titles.
Oh yeah,
and Summoner was one of those.
I almost got Godfall. That would have been my dumb one on the PS5.
Yeah,
safe to say my launch title choice was a success this time around with Demon Souls.
Demon Souls, yeah.
I'm glad I got that over Sackboy or Godfall because yeah, that was a good one.
Well, I've heard good things about Sackboy, but I got Spider-Man Miles Morales.
I heard bad things about. I guess I got that too. Yeah, I had both of those. I had both Demon Souls and Spider-Man. Those are the two ones I walked out there with. All right, so our next question is: how has Volition brought innovation to the industry? What has Volition contributed to this overall thing called gaming culturally or technologically?
Yeah, I had to do a little research because I'm not as familiar with Volition, having only played Red Faction and Summoner. Briefly, I dabbled in Summoner, but like I haven't played any of the Saints Row games, but I know what they are. So anyway, I did some research. So innovation, Red Faction being that, what did you call the ground pounder? The ground pounder game where like it is sandboxy. Like that was very, very sandboxy for first person shooters, and you could destroy any of the environment. You could dig in like a mine with missile launcher and like blow up the earth and like see what kind of craziness you could get into without even having to advance the story. You could get hours of content. Like that was kind of unprecedented for a first person shooter when you have games like Half-Life, which is advancing the ways with which you tell a story. And that was happening in Red Faction. The story was happening around the player, but you could also like go crazy and manipulate your environment. So I thought that was very, idea of like everything can be blown up. Yeah.
For such a relatively B game from a B studio, it stands out in my mind as like one of those moments that blew my mind with what video games were capable of as a kid. I was like, oh my gosh. Like to this day, I couldn't tell you crap about Red Factions. Like I couldn't tell you, I knew it took place on Mars.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you what guns could you get. I don't know.
Yeah.
What was the story about? I don't know. And I can't even tell you what the enemies were in Red Faction. Were they aliens? Were they robots? Were they soldiers?
Great question. I can't remember.
I imagine they were vaguely humanoid in shape, but that's my point. My point is I don't remember very much about Red Faction, but I remember what it looked like to blow up a wall. I remember what it looked like to dig a hole like 30 feet down in the game and get stuck there, right? Like that's what I remember. So yeah, totally like new use of technology. And like by today's standards, sure, maybe a little bit amateurishly done, but at the time it was a mind-blowing advancement in video game design. So yeah, good on them.
Yeah, I like that. It's good. And then, of course, we all had the popularity of Grand Theft Auto running rampant ever since the release of Grand Theft Auto 3. And so kind of their response to that, or even like competing against it, was Saints Row. And the first game didn't do this a whole lot, but I actually got a list of kind of comparisons of what Saints Row was versus Grand Theft Auto. And that kind of highlights the innovation that Volition brought in that regard with the sandbox open worldy type game. So a crazier, more ridiculous weapons, more creative stuff like summoning sewer sharks. There's a lot of adult content, or family friendly podcast.
There's a gun that fires I'll just say marital aid. How about that?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, which is ridiculous. And then there's like more fleshed out, better side missions that are deeper and more involved. So in Grand Theft Auto, the side missions were very, very shallow, fetch questy type. Yeah. Go do this thing, go drive this person there. So this built that in. Character customization was not a thing in Grand Theft Auto, but it is in Saints Row. You can make up your characters, so you can go crazy with all the things. I mean, you could customize outfits you bought in Grand Theft Auto, to their defense, but it wasn't like you could facial features and stuff like in Saints Row. You
skin color and all that stuff, and in Saints Row you can make your character like all pretty much short of being a literal unicorn, like whatever a unicorn would look like as a person, you can make that in Saints Row. It's like they went so far in the opposite direction of trying to distinguish themselves from like, okay, we're not just a Grand Theft Auto clone. We are our own thing. So therefore, in Grand Theft Auto, can you fly like Superman? You can in Saints Row. You can get superpowers, basically. Does Satan take over the White House and kidnap the president's daughter and turn it like, no, not in Grand Theft Auto, but in Saints Row, it's like you start it's like in one game you're fighting aliens, and then it turns out the aliens are working for Satan, so you fight Satan in like the third one, and then the fourth one. It's like, it's absurd. And though I love that, though on the one hand I'm like, this is adorable, this game is just ridiculously over the top, on the other hand it's almost too far. It lost my interest because it was just too much of just like, there's no grounding in this game. And it was fun for like, it was fun to, shoot a gun that have a gun that shoots exploding marital aids. Yes. It was fun to jump around the city like Superman, but then eventually that novelty wore off, and it was like, what is the point of this game? Was a downside.
What am I doing?
Otherwise, I adore the concept, but the execution of it left something to be desired, and makes you think like, okay, yeah, as much as Grand Theft Auto's it's almost like it's served by its grounding, right? Like, yeah, sure, it's more tethered to the earth, but like Saints Row, unfortunately, will never be able to compete with it in an effort to compete by doing something different. It's a strange franchise, all things considered. So I don't know. We'll have to see how this new entry, if they can kind of bring it. It looks like they're trying to dial it back a little bit.
Right. Go back to the roots a little, good. And like, yep.
Yeah, that's good. But I wonder how. There's so many more, like, again, at the time when Saints Row came out, it was like, oh, this is so trying so hard to be, but also not be Grand Theft Auto. Now, I mean, with like Cyberpunk and Just Cause and There are so many open world games that take place in like city environments and that have sandbox elements, but also storytelling elements. It's the landscape's different now, so maybe it'll stand out despite a more crowded space.
Yeah,
I don't know. We'll have to
especially
see. I'm
in
very
like
curious.
a sea of not a whole lot of releases right now, and Grand Theft Auto hasn't had a new release since 5, which was in 2013.
And people are so ticked off about Grand Theft Auto Online, whereas Saints Row seems to have no intentions of doing anything like that.
So it could actually be the best time to come out with a reboot for Saints Row right now, given the landscape.
I've got my eye on it. It's not something that I've committed to buying, but I want to see the reviews, and it would be a great... I feel like it would be a great game to sink my teeth into at this, like you said, in this drought. So it's like, it's one of those where I'm like,
I want something
I'm keeping
new.
A side eye on you. I'm interested in you, but I want to see how others in this. I was gonna make a comparison to like group dating, right, where it's like speed dating or whatever, and see like how other men rate you or whatever. It got really weird in my head really fast, and it's nothing like that. And I've never experienced that. Like that form of dating either, so I legitimately cannot talk right now, and probably will cut this. I might leave it in for the sake of it being awkward, but
that's funny.
I don't have a good comparison here. All I'm saying is I'm intrigued by the game, but yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to derail, but like that is, because that's kind of getting into maybe another question, but yeah, that's nevertheless, like it's sort of like they were one of the first game franchise to really just like pull the ripcord on the ridiculous, right, and absurd and almost avant-garde, and it was sort of like maybe they overdid it, but sometimes you got to be the first one to overdo it and then be able to dial it back so that other developers, like I wonder if I think about games like Sunset Overdrive, right, or even the Ratchet and Clank franchise and the direction they've taken that, where it's like maybe those developers felt more comfortable doing wacky and wild things with their weapons and their stories because Saints Row had sort of just pulled the ripcord, like popped the top off of that, compared to at a time when games were trending more towards realism and gritty, dark. Every single assault weapon in every single game fires the exact same way.
Yeah.
Like,
let's mix it up and do something insane. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, I like it. And so that was my last point. You kind of nailed it. Innovative gameplay, new fighting styles, new weapons, get superpowers, like craziness, stuff you don't see in Grand
which
Theft Auto
benefits
type
everyone,
things, so.
right? Because even if the game's a flop, which by no means is Saints Row a flop, right? These are successful game franchises. Volition is doing good work and they have a good following, right? So I don't want to give the impression, just because my impression is that it wasn't like my cup of tea, doesn't mean it's still not like bad. Like I would say they're not nearly as popular as Grand Theft Auto, but nevertheless, like they have a following, and their fans love them because they're not Grand Theft Auto, I think.
Yep.
That said, it still benefits everybody, right? Because then, like, if they're trying to figure out how to make a sewer shark gun work, then they're experimenting with technologies and physics in the game that other developers could then later benefit from, right? So I think that there's definitely a lot of value in their experimental approach to game development, and that I think is sort of what, if I were to pin one thing on like Volition's like contributions to gaming, it would be that experimenting with just like, how can we like here's a big idea, how can we make it real, right? Like good on them. That seems to be their cup of tea. I'll circle back around to that. With all that in mind, all that innovation and stuff, do you have any experience with the Volition games you'd like to talk to as like your favorite experience?
My favorite was of these probably just Red Faction, because that was the only I've played Descent, and I found it, I guess I was way too late to the game, and some games just don't age well, and that's not, in the moment they come out, they're fine, so you can't really control how well something ages, because you're not developing a game for 20 years from now, you're developing it for now. I played Descent, it wasn't my cup of tea. I did play Red Faction on PS2, and I love the aspect like we talked about where you can blow things up. And I played Summoner, which was terrible. I just remember everything about that game not being fun, so it didn't really click. And I played Red Faction 2 briefly, and I've always wanted to play Saints Row. I've actually have like a collection of some of these games on my PlayStation account. I don't know if they were free from PSN or if they were ridiculously cheap in packs. In fact, I think I got Red Faction with a Humble Bundle from years ago. That was actually a PlayStation Humble Bundle, which was amazing.
Yeah, nice.
So it was like $2 for a collection of PlayStation games. So yeah, not a whole lot. So I guess I just have to pick my favorite from what I played, and that's Red Faction.
Nice.
Before we jump into
I've played Saints Row 4, and I liked it. I just, like I said, all the impressions I just said about being overwhelmed. I have it on Steam, so I probably will not like ever fire it up because it's on Steam now, so it's sort of locked away into that ecosystem for me. Not never, but I'm less likely to. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
You know what? I thought, I bet we should have. I'm just thinking now because back to our DLC question real quick.
Yeah.
Complete side tangent, and we won't dig into it. But what I should have said was, what's the difference between open world, sandbox, and survival? Because I feel like survival is just sort of another iteration on that same.
Oh yeah,
those same
nuance.
concepts. Yeah, because it is slightly nuanced, right?
Yep.
Much more in the sandbox direction, but still, I wouldn't call it a sandbox game. It's like a sandbox game that has actual stakes and consequences. Put it that way. Yep. Anyways, circling back around to my point, I have Saints Row 4. I'd still say I think Red Faction stands out, but no Volition game has really captured me. Nothing has gripped me and made me want to not let go. So that is, I would say that sort of would be sort of a knock against this developer. I want them to because I like what they do. I really love what they do. They're such a creative developer, but I just haven't found that game that's gripped me. So
interestingly enough, I just looked on my PlayStation account and I have Saints Row 4 re-elected. That must have been 2015, probably a PlayStation Plus game. But for those of us who joined the new tiered system, Saints Row the Third Remastered for PS4 and PS5 are available there. I just claimed them to my library. So if you're looking to jump into Saints Row and you have PlayStation Plus subscription and our conversations inspired you to do it, there's a PlayStation 5 native version of Saints Row the Third Remastered. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Nice.
Didn't know it had come out, but it's the PS5 version, so you take advantage of load times and all the modern console.
Might be the best
stuff.
Time to jump in, or just wait for the new one.
And I also have Gat Out of Hell, which is one of the Saints Row spinoffs that's in my library.
Yeah, it's a spinoff. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So if you follow our advice and you've been claiming your PlayStation Plus games every single month, like you should, like a good little PlayStation kid, then you should have half this stuff. Hopefully, easy time to jump in too during our drought.
I think that Gat is played by the voice of Gat is so. The body, by the way, of Gat from Gat Out of Hell is A-Ray. A-Ray did all the, or not all, I think, but he did much of the motion capture for the character of Gat. But the voice of Gat is Daniel Dae Kim, who is one of my absolute favorite Asian American actors. He was from Lost. He was the yeah.
No, he's
so
awesome.
good. He's so good.
Yeah.
So yeah,
nice.
Cool. All right. Well, then I think that leads us segues us nicely to our last question, which is what would you like to see more or less of from Volition in the future? And I've sort of been dancing around this. They have so much creativity. They have so much they're innovating with all these new physics and stuff to try to make their big ideas work. I just wish they would stop trying to emulate and replicate games, instead make something unique and brand new and original, because they have all these unique, brand new, original ideas, and yet with Red Faction they were still just trying to ride off the Half-Life, make a game like Half-Life with a new cool physics, right?
Yep.
Same thing with Saints Row. It's they're trying to ride off the coattails of GTA's popularity. I don't really know anything about Agents of Mayhem. Maybe that was their attempt at doing exactly what I'm describing, but I also feel like they could do so well with some of these concepts in just a different setting. Get rid of the stop doing guns or agents and just make something crazy and fun and set it in space, or set it they've already set these things in space and hell and these games, Saints Row, they have settings there. It's why not go into just make a game in a wacky place with a brand new kind of approach to genre. I don't know. Obviously they would still be pulling elements from existing games. I'm not expecting them to completely remake gaming from the ground up. What I'm saying though is that I feel like they're married to a very specific kind of chasing trends, and I wish they would instead try to set some trends, I think is what I would like to see from Volition, because otherwise
they have potential to do that. I feel like there are aspects of what Volition has done first that have been captured by the industry. So I remember Battlefield 4 had Levolution or whatever, and their multiplayer things where you could destroy aspects of the map and it would affect the entire landscape. Definitely you can draw a line right back to Red Faction and drilling holes in the ground. And the zany craziness of the weapons in Saints Row, there's totally a ton of developers who have made games that do crazy stuff now because they felt enabled by Saints Row.
Yeah.
So they definitely put their mark on the industry as far as those innovations. And I'm with you, a unique IP, a new entire type of game. Almost, I feel like if a studio is going to come up with a new genre, like the newest genre we have come up with. What was it? In our genres discussion, the newest one. It's like, is it the battle royale? Is it arena shooters, MOBA?
Battle royale is probably the latest one that we've ever covered as like a proper like solidified.
I know like
genre.
roguelites are kind of new, and
kind of, yeah. I mean,
what
they're like
Returnal was
old
doing.
new. Yeah, they're old new in the sense that like they trace way back to like as old as any of the game genres we've covered, and yet they have a resurgence and a specific now prototype that's a bit more new.
So I feel like anyway, I'm just rambling at this point, but yeah, there's all these genres. I feel like Volition could come up with a new one. Like they have that kind of innovation in that studio, and the talent is
absolutely there. It's almost like their micro ideas are like good enough for that, but their macro, they still seem to be placing these great smaller ideas inside of a bigger structure that they seem to be just sort of templating off of existing games. And I agree, if they can just sort of expand it to like, okay, let's do what we do really well, but put it in our own, like wrap it in our own packaging, would be great to see. So, and they have the talent for it, right? They can absolutely do it. This is a very minor criticism. This is just more like an encouragement, sort of like a punch in the arm, where it's like stings a little bit. Hopefully, if anyone from Volition would ever listen to this, might sting a little bit, but it's, hopefully gets you thinking like, what could we do with what we have? And what you have is an incredibly talented studio. So, yeah, anyways, that is what I would like to see more of from them, right? And I'm like sneaky rooting for Saints Row. I want that game. I want people to say, I don't necessarily want to jump in with like firing up Saints Row 4 again, right? Like on Steam or anything. I would love to revisit Saints Row 4 after falling in love with the franchise with the new one,
this
right?
new one?
So,
yeah,
exactly. So I'm like secretly rooting for it, but I'm not committing to buying it yet until I see how the industry or how the culture responds. So, well, cool. I think that's pretty much our episode. So what would you like to talk to us about, listeners? What feedback do you have on Volition? Are they the absolute greatest developer and we are like dum-dums for never playing them, and we should do the, we should give them their day in the sun immediately and go play their games immediately and like literally quit our jobs and play all of Volition games? Or or are they like hot garbage and you'll never touch a Volition game again because it, insulted your mother or whatever? We want to hear all those thoughts and everything in between. And Termite will share with you where you can provide us with that feedback.
Despite what we just said about what we want from Volition, how Disney should pursue Volition to create the next Star Wars Squadron game. Let us know how you feel about that over at 80bit Podsmash, 80bitpodsmash.com. It's our landing website where there are links to all of our social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, and a Discord server where you can jump in and live chat. We've actually got a conversation spin up today. Speaking of Disney, that was great. That was cool. Like actual interactions are happening. So jump in on the fun. Get
everybody
in on
dogpiling on my opinions. I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's not what happened. That's not what happened at all.
So please go check us out. If you are listening to us on like YouTube or Twitch, or if you've just found out about us through some other way and you want to know where our podcast platform is or what the deal is with our show, every Monday at midnight a new episode launches, and we launch on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, all the big ones, as our RSS feed is readily available as well to you. So if you want to put it in a third-party app on any device you have, feel free to do that. And we are always ad-free, and we don't make any money on this. We do it for you. And we're family friendly. So come join in on the next episode. Come check us out. 80bitpodsmash.com.
Nice. Yeah, our Discord is just apparently a bunch of toxic Marvel and Disney fanboys.
Yes, that's all we are.
That's it. That's all they are.
Toxic.
So they've driven me away, and I've let no. Next, speaking of toxicity, next week we are talking about System of a Down, a band that made a great song called Toxicity. No, I'm kidding. We're not doing that. We are talking about cheating. Cheaters. Cheat us never prosper.
Are we going to talk about Action Replay and Game Shark and Game Genie?
We can talk, yes, about all those things because they are an important part of cheating in video game history.
Yeah,
and because you're right. It's more than just bad people behaving badly. Sometimes cheating can be fun, and can be made fun. I had a blast
cheating in games.
I did too. Youth. I loved cheating in games in your youth because it didn't matter back then because there was no like money at stake. But
right,
and the landscape has changed. There's esports, competitive games. There's people's, and even less important than that, still there are like people's like games are now connected in a way they aren't before. So why do people cheat? Like, why do people feel the need to cheat?
So we'll talk about aimbot
Games.
a little bit too then.
We'll talk about aimbot. We'll talk about all that stuff. Although aimbot almost deserves its own entire conversation. But anyways, we'll get into it then next week.
With
So
that,
we'll see you then.
We'll see you next week.